Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Netling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Netling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you and your business to take it to the next level. Today, I am very excited to interview Glenn Poulos. And let me tell you about Glenn. So Glenn is the co-founder and vice president and general manager of Gap Wireless, Inc., a leading distributor for the mobile broadband wireless and test and measurement equipment markets. With over 3 decades of experience in sales, he spent thousands of hours in the field or on the phone with with customers and workers of salespeople to create several very successful companies. And after entering the sales field in 1985 as a technical sales rep, Glenn founded his first company, Wave Technologies, Inc., in 1991, and he simultaneously served as president of Anritsu, is that how you say it? Anritsu
Yes,
Electronics for 9 years. Using his extensive knowledge and experience in the industry, he lectures groups on sales strategy, consumerism, and what motivates people at the raw emotional level. A title I took today was based on some of the interview questions we're going to have, and it is what to do and what to avoid to get the deal. Please join me in welcoming Glenn Poulos. Hello, Glenn.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you so much for having me.
So we always start with an easy question, and then I have some follow-ons. Where do you call home right now?
So I live in Oakville, Ontario, which is near Toronto, Canada. And I'm fortunate enough to have a weekend place, which we call in Canada up north. In Toronto, we call this, when you go out of the city, they call that going up north, right? And so I'm one of the lucky ones. I've got a place up here, and I had to come up here for a roof repair. So I got to come up a day early. Normally I come up Friday night.
Nice.
So I'm from Ontario, Canada.
I'm very familiar with Ontario. I helped launch the UPS store.
Oh, wow.
So I spent 2 years going back and forth from Atlanta to Toronto.
Wow.
And
nice.
It was great. I loved being there. The people were so friendly and wonderful.
Oh, nice.
All right. So the first question I have, though, outside of the normal questions I have, is what was Wave Technologies' focus, as well as your other company? What were those two companies actually doing? Was it in the wireless?
Yeah. So I'll explain that. The word Wave is a technical term that I coined. The name I'd come up for the company, it got rejected on the nuance search, and I had I'm at the lawyers trying to incorporate the companies, like that's not going to work, right? And I thought, I was flipping through a technical magazine looking for a word that was unlikely to have been taken, and Wave was the word, right? And I thought, oh, that's perfect. But when I was starting that company, that was in 1991. It was because I was quitting my job as a technical sales rep because the owner of the company didn't want to partner with me on this new venture. And I was going after this newfangled technology. Now, it never went anywhere. It was all based around the cell phone, right? And we know that didn't go anywhere. No, who needs a cell phone, right? And just flash in the pan, right? And but Wave, it's got to do with the frequency of the phone, and the new 5G is based on Wave technology. Yeah. So yeah, back in 1991, I was sort of like 35 years ahead of my time in terms of using that sort of buzzword, because it's quite popular now for the
Wow.
new radios that are out there. And my new company is the same sort of business, a little different. And I started that in 2007. I have had a partner in Quebec, and we sold the business in February of 2022. So like a year and a half ago, sort of like a little over a year ago.
Right in the
Yeah, right in the sweet spot. And I think to myself, it was probably the best time to sell.
yeah.
But I mean, of course, 2022 was a banner year for I think most people, especially in technology. And yeah, and so I agreed to stay on, and now I actually have a job, and I work for the company that bought me. And I have a boss and several bosses. And
How's that going for you?
yeah, that's quite different. Yeah, quite different. I can definitely write a book on that. I'm
Yeah,
just
for
taking
sure.
notes right now.
I'll send you the transcript.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I
Oh,
retired in 2018 after 20 years of project management, and the I spent 2 years just kind of being the normal retiree, going on trips, hanging out with my grandson,
yeah.
watching Hallmark Channel, and I says, "Well,
Yeah.
this is not for me."
Yeah.
So, I started my businesses, and I had already an anti-aging business that I was doing as a side hustle. So the funny thing was, I got called just as I guess 2 months after I incorporated, the my old company called me and said, "Could you stand up a PMO for us? It's just going to be a short thing." A year later, I was still
Yeah.
doing
Right.
that project, but as you say, though, it is weird once you are your boss to
Yeah.
be an employee again.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible, but it was
No,
just
right. Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Right.
So how do you show them with the WSP method to maximize you and your product's attractiveness to the eye of the consumer?
So yeah, so the way we kind of say it is showing them the WSP. That's kind of the way it comes off the tongue when you're saying it, like just show them the
Show them, yeah,
WSP,
yeah, yeah.
show them the WSP, right? Which is sort of your winning sales personality, but really it's just
Ah,
an acronym for the behavior of what you're doing. And it really goes back to a kind of a phrase which I didn't make up, but is attraction is not a choice, right?
ah,
And the whole idea behind what I learned about selling is that there's kind of two ways to present a product, and sometimes this comes out a little sideways, but nonetheless, the way I tell the story in the book is about there's a beautiful woman. She's standing in the lobby. She has this bright red dress on, and so it was during a seminar, and I asked everyone who walked in after lunch. I said, how many of you noticed that woman in the red dress? And they all put up their hand, right? And I said, how many of you noticed those three guys over by the that were sort of bickering over by the front desk? And no one put up their hand. I go, that's the WSP, right?
yeah,
That,
yeah.
like, it's something. And basically when something, and it doesn't I just use the example of a lady in a nice red dress or whatever. Another example is cars, right?
Oh, yeah.
um
Oh, yes.
like who noticed that Mercedes GT parked out front? Everyone, why? Because it's just amazing to look at.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it doesn't have a sign on it that says, hey, look at me, or it doesn't have, the horn doesn't honk every 3 minutes going, hey, look at me, hey, look at me, hey, look at me, right? And so many of the sales guys that I've worked with, they're kind of like
Honking their
macho
horn.
bravado, braggadocious. I like to use that word in the book, right? Look
Yes.
at me, I've got the best product, and
Yeah.
we're the biggest, the fastest, the widest, the deepest, the cheapest.
Mm,
And I said that's not what gets a customer's attention. What gets their
mm,
attention is when you show your product in its natural light. allowing its attractiveness to come out naturally, right? And so that can be done by sometimes showing a video of where your product or service is, is demonstrating its capability just by looking at it, right?
Yeah.
And not somebody just bragging about it. And so that's what I mean by show them the WSP.
Right.
And oftentimes, because I sell high ticket, high tech items, right? That's what our companies typically sell.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these products are cool, right? And
Yeah.
they do cool things, and they do it in a nice, cool way. And of course, being in a sales company, we're always selling the latest technology, right? So I'm not selling yesterday's products.
Yes.
I'm always bringing the latest technology. I get to push the latest buttons and show the latest products, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we look at these products and we're like, wow, this is cool. Like, this is really state of the art. And then so we'll say, the guy will say, I'm going to the customer and to show it to them next week. And I'm like, show them the WSP, right? Like,
yeah,
and just
create that FOMO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really mean, a lot of times, the things I'm saying is what not to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't go marching in with this big, with your muscle shirt on and, flexing your muscles and going, I'm the biggest, I'm the best, right? You want to have a more subtle, more natural approach to how you drive attractiveness towards your product or service. And it's not easy sometimes to figure out ways. But if you put your mind to it, you can often figure out ways of showing it in its best light. So
I was on a sales team. We had a special group of 20 of us, and our customers were not doing something that they needed to be doing. They were causing a problem, but I couldn't go to the customer and say, you're breaking the system. you're screwing up. You couldn't do that. So we booked 3 hours with them to just chat. And our premise was, we're just going to talk about the technology that they put in place over the last 10 years, and have them tell us, what have they done to innovate and be creative? And they shared everything for the first hour. And then we shared for the next hour the things that we did for the last 25, 30 years to innovate, to better serve them and whatnot. And then I showed them a 7-minute video and this is when I worked for UPS, of their packages going through our largest automated hub and as it's going all through this thing, and they're just watching these packages, and all of a sudden these packages start to go off to the side. And they're like, oh. And I just was like, wait for it. And they're like, that's not my package, is it? And I said, as a matter of fact, it is. And then they would do anything I asked them. And if they, at any time, as they're telling about what they're doing, talked about a problem that our company could help them with, I bagged all of the stuff that I was going to do and just helped them to try to solve their problem. And again, they would do anything I asked them to do. And it wasn't me, ringing that bell or anything. And I think that's what people forget when they sell.
Yeah.
That, you got to listen.
Yeah, that's genius. And that's definitely showing them the WSP for sure. Yeah.
I know.
Well
it was
done.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, that, and those are kind of lessons, as I didn't ever consider myself a salesperson, but when I believe in something, I can pitch it for sure. And that to me was so great, because I thought, when we first got on this assignment, I thought I was going to have to convince them, and all these much smarter people than me. Just a 7-minute video is all I needed.
Yeah. The video is the example I give most of the time on how you can accomplish so much more. Just quietly, don't say anything, let the video run, and let it speak for itself, right?
Yeah.
And
so you also talk about greed-based learning and how that helps you obtain the knowledge to sell your product. Can you go into a little bit more detail about greed-based learning? Yeah.
So again, these are all tricks that I learned of the trade as I was, coming up from mid-20s to, well, now I'm 61, if I'm honest. And,
well, that makes me feel old, because I'm much older.
Well, but the first company I worked for, they sold products from about 40 companies around the world, and each
Wow.
company, had 5 or 10 products, and do the maths, like 300-400 products I had to learn, right? I found it was like virtually impossible, right? And there was all sorts of different technology needs that they were meeting with customers, and so there was really no systematic approach, right? And I was working through the products one at a time, and then eventually, I started getting in front of customers and getting opportunities, and I realized that it was just an instinct that I recognized in myself, which was that once I could tie this is where greed comes in, right? Once where I could tie a financial gain for myself to the technology that I was selling, the learning became effortless, right? And so this is the way, as a way I train new people on, how am I going to learn all these products or whatever? And I said, you don't need to learn them all. You just need to learn them one at a time. And how am I going to do that? Just use greed-based learning, right? And I said, and I explained to them, like, this product here, this is we sell all sorts of different products. One of the things we sell are, for instance, a $100,000 antenna that companies buy in order for special events, to maximize the number of cell phone users. And $100,000 for an antenna is a lot, right?
Yeah.
And but I said, now imagine, your commission on that if you get the sale. And what if they buy 3 or 4 for different, regions and things like that? I said, now go home and now learn about the product, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, when you break it down, right, it sounds very simple, but the example I use in the book, which really I think sends it home for a lot of people, is that I don't know anything about cars. I'm not a car person. I mean, I enjoy driving my car, and I enjoy having a nice car, what have you. But every 4 years I get a car, and sort of every 3 to 4 years, you get a new car. And for those 2 weeks when I'm looking at cars, I become like an expert, and everybody at work and at home, I can justify why I need this particular brand. It doesn't, and through the years, I've sort of traded up in terms of the brands, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to justify myself between Audi, Mercedes, and BMW. Before it was Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler, but I would know the size of the tires, and the horsepower, and the torque, and the carburation, and the exhaust, and I'd be rhyming off all this stuff, and I'd finally get the car that I wanted after just getting so excited about it, and then I would just forget about all those facts, right? And for 4 years I wouldn't think about cars again, right? Then all of a sudden, instantly, I would get this capacity to learn about cars, right? And it's like, where do I, I don't naturally understand it or know it, but for some reason, during that period of when I'm getting a car, my ability to retain the information becomes effortless. And what happens as a salesperson is, over time, because these things reoccur, you build a knowledge base to become, and again, also there's other tips I go through in the book where you don't have to learn to be a PhD in automobiles or antennas or anything like that. You just need to learn the top sort of 5 key things to sound intelligent, and then how to leverage the experts in your company or your environment that you're in, right? Like, we work with engineers and product managers and people from the companies which are scattered around the world, right? And I do tell a story about how when I meet new vendors from new companies, how I drill them on the way to customers, and throughout each meeting, throughout the days that I'm with them, I'm remembering more and more of what the product manager says.
Yeah.
And by the end of the day that I'm with them, I'm basically carrying on the first 20 minutes or so of the discussion with the customer. Whereas a lot of times salespeople just stand there and they'll let the vendor or whatever do the talking, and heaven forbid, sometimes I've seen them pull out their phones and things like that.
Oh, good.
And yeah. And then I build up those those 4 or 5 key points. And then I say, and now let John tell you the rest of the story about this wonderful product, right? Yeah. And there's there's examples I give where they had, after they had visited our company, they'd call my boss. This was at my first job, and they'd say, "Oh, that Glenn guy, he's awesome. Like, don't ever lose him, right? He's amazing."
Yeah.
And it was just about the way I interacted with the information and the customer and the vendor to just to show value. And so
and that's I think that's important too. And as you're doing that talk or whatnot, how you listen to what's being said and be able to interact and pivot when needed, is also important. And I think those people that were standing along the way, if you panned it off to them and all of a sudden they're parroting what you just said because they didn't listen to what you just said, then that's not going to make them give a good impression. So all the more reason to pay attention, y'all.
Yeah.
So what are the 10 types of challenging customer? I could go for more than 10 maybe, but go ahead. Give me the top 10.
I'm not sure I have those memorized.
Give me two. What's the two that come to mind the most?
So the biggest one that we deal with is the sort of the, I would say like the know-it-all, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so they're not wanting to, allow, like you show up and you're trying to present your product. I already know about that. Just, tell me your price, and leave me the information, and not, they've already really made up their mind, and they're being inflexible in terms of wanting to allow you to compete. Right. And usually that occurs when they're trying to keep their primary choice honest, right? So they really don't want to buy your product. And their CFO or somebody in the finance says you got to get 3 quotes, or and so to make it look good, they bring in a couple of competitors, but they really don't want to allow you the opportunity to present your product in the best light, because they don't really want to have their mind changed, right? And and I mean, which like the also goes along with being in one of the ones that I think is I gave them all names, and I'm sorry, I just can't remember them, but intransigent Ian or something like that is one of the ones I name, where even when you've shown them beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're just intransigent about wanting to change their mind, right? I've
been on both sides of that.
There's the other challenging one I have is where I have a saying. It's called implied familiarity also breeds contempt, right? I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, familiarity breeds contempt. And it's kind of like if you get stuck with a person, for some people, for too long, it's like you kind of get contemptuous about some of their behaviors. It's very common, right? And especially in traveling and trips and things like that, right? And
I think marriage too. So
for sure. I didn't want to go there, but
I know. Well, I've been married 44 years, so I can go there. It's good.
For sure. But what I do find with some people is that they imply familiarity, and so in this particular one, actually, I guess sometimes more of on the salesperson with the buyer, where they're walking in, and I tell a story about a guy who he looks behind the buyer and he says, "Oh, I didn't know you were a fisherman, and I'm a fisherman. It looks like you're bass fishing. We should go fishing on the weekend." And the guy looks over his shoulder and he says, "Oh my God," he said, "I forgot that photo was there." He goes, "That's my ex-father-in-law." He goes, "I hate fishing." He said, "It was just, I had to do that to keep my wife happy." And, and he grabs the photo, sort of throws it in the trash. And basically you're implying that you're familiar with the guy, but you're not, right? And it's same thing, like, you might be an avid golfer, and you might, maybe a customer dropped a bucket, like a little sleeve of golf balls, and you start rhyming off about, "Hey, let me take you over to this links club and we'll go golfing and do 18 holes." And before you've established rapport, right? Not allowing people to establish rapport. And so that's a big challenge. you know, the big thing that that I like to try to get across in the book is the sort of the concepts of rapport and active listening, and the techniques for doing that, right? And I give people exercises, especially to work on with their spouse, on practicing active listening, and it's often makes for some fun stories and what have you. But for me, my approach is that even if I'm going to lose the business, I want to make sure the customer finds the interaction with me to be the highlight of the transaction. So I'm not always going to get the business, and so when I realize
you don't want to burn bridges, right? So it's not a no, it's just not right now.
Yes, exactly. And so I always teach my guys, look, when you get to the point where you realize from a pretty much unequivocal sense that you're not getting the order, you need to excuse yourself politely from the competition. And because every dollar you spend trying to get an order you're not getting, you're wasting it. You would be better off to go to the guy, let's say brand A, that's getting the business, go to the next customer where that guy's not at, and go and get that customer's attention, right? Because the guy can't be in two places at one time. Right. So the rule is I'd rather be last than second. Right. And because it costs a lot of money to come in second, but to come in last and to, but to recuse yourself, that's when you start saving money. You're not flying engineers in from around the world, bringing in the factory people, scheduling webinars and, expensive demos when you can realize that you don't have the right product, or they're not going to engage with you. It's a tough call. Like, people are like, oh, you should fight to the end. And I'm like, well, no, you should definitely present your products in their best light, show them the WSP. But the moment you realize that they're really going a different way, then you want to stop expending your company's resources and then chase to the next deal before that guy can get there, and have him come in behind you, right? And
right.
Yeah. Going along with that same rule is which I realized myself, right? Which was, if you're selling the number 3 or 4 brand, a lot of times people go into sales, they don't realize it till they get the job, but they realize that they're working for the number 3 or the number 4 brand. Well, the Pareto principle of 80-20 is, usually the top brand gets 80%, right? The second brand gets the 80% of the what's left. And by 3 or 4, you're fighting on 3 or 4% of the business, right? And so my recommendation is, if you find yourself selling the number 4 brand, you need to quit and go and get a job at a better company, right? Like, you built your skills up, and it's because you only have one life to live, right? You only have one career. And so you might as well work for the top brand you can get at, so that your skills can be rewarded, by the market, right? And because who wants to spend all their time selling a product where most of the time you won't get the business, right?
Yeah.
And
sure. You talked a little bit about your book, and I just wanted to introduce the book itself. Is Never Sit in the Lobby. And if you could just share a bit about, some of the information that they'll find in that book beyond what we've already talked about.
Okay, so so it starts off with a series of sort of the rules that any salesperson would want to follow. At least I would hope they would want to follow. And the saying I like to say is how to get, act, and stay in front of customers and be a pleasure to do business with always.
Yeah.
Right. That's sort of the little saying I like to share about what really about what the book is about. And it starts with the title of the book, which is Never Sit in the Lobby, right? And so people are like, what do you mean by that? Should I sit in my car? And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Don't show up late. Don't show up too early. Get to the lobby, introduce yourself, and don't sit down, right? Be waiting, don't be on your phone, texting your spouse or looking at Facebook, or, be attentive, be waiting for the person to walk in, and be standing so that when they walk through the door, you can shake their hand, say hello, and start. And then another rule, and it's a little like a whole kind of like spiel, if I should say that, of rules that all go together. And the next one is always have something in your hand and something in your mind, right?
Mhm.
And so in that case, it's could be a quotation they asked for, it could be literature they were interested in, or it might be like a promotional item that your company's giving away, golf balls, mouse pads, pens, all that sort of trinkets that companies give away. But always have something in your hand and always have something in your mind specifically that you want to talk to them about. And the next little rule in that sort of series is always ask for a mini tour, right? And so one asks, what's a mini tour, right? Like, what's the difference? Why is it a mini tour, right? And I'm like, well, a mini tour is a tour that's mini, and it means basically it's not a tour. Because if you've ever been on a tour, you go on, you go away with your husband or wife, and you're in a city, and you go on these 4-hour tours, right? And by the time the 4 hours are up, you're kind of drained, right? And so people don't want to have to give you a 4-hour tour. But a mini tour is one where they're taking to see their new lab or their new warehouse or their new facility, the new office, something. The reason that you're there for the kind of products that you sell or services, and what you're trying to do is figure out a way of getting behind the lobby and into their office when you didn't have a scheduled meeting for it. It's just, hey, I know you have that new lab that is there any way I could get a quick look at it? Just a mini tour. And then usually when they kind of hum and haw or whatever, and they kind of get like a little reticent about it or whatever, I say, look, I promise I won't sell anyone any encyclopedias while we're while we're in there, right? And they usually laugh, or I'll say, I won't sell you any insurance or any encyclopedias or anything like that, right? And they'll laugh, right? And so and a couple of the other 2 rules that sort of go with that little pack is never forget a face, right? And so what I do is when I get to a client, nowadays before I had a call book, but nowadays obviously I have my phone and my laptop. I'll actually go to that customer. I'll say, who here have I met, right? And what I do is I remember their face, right? And so because we've all been in those situations where you walk in and someone immediately announces you by name. It says, oh, hi, Vicki, and you're like, oh, hi, and and the moment's gone, right? It's done.
I remember faces, I can't remember names. That's so frustrating.
Yeah. And it leaves that, it's, as I love to say, it's not a good look, right? And so what I do is I remember them. And so I remember, hey, Tom, he's the tall guy, right? Bob, that's the bald guy. Sally's got red hair, whatever. And if I don't remember them and I can't picture them or what have you, now I have the joy of being able to go to LinkedIn, and seeing their photo, right? And
that's
so I remember
awesome
them.
Idea.
Yeah. And so now I, showed up in the lobby, something in my hand, asked for a mini tour. They're walking me to the lab to show me the new facility, right? What do I walk by? There's Sally. Hey, Sally, how's it going?
Nice.
It's like, that again. And then Bob, Jack, Sam, Joe, Bill, and then these people, they start to remember, like, oh, that Glenn guy, he always remembers my name. And he's my favorite salesperson. And these are the thoughts that go through their minds, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And the guy that you're with, if you're kind of new, he's like, holy, this guy knows everybody. And it establishes sort of rapport, right? And and so those are kind of rules that I stack together, and it's in sort of to when I first show up at a customer, and and how to engage them, right? So that's part of the book. The other parts are, there's a lot of sections on rapport, and then there's some tough lessons I learned about not doing due diligence on hiring. I actually go right into even explaining where to sit at a table during a customer lunch or dinner.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, I have it all down to a science, right? And what do I order? Where do I sit? How do I behave? And the reason why the rules are there is because I tell the stories of the guys that screwed up in my career, and I name the rules after them, right? And I had this one guy that one of the funniest stories I love telling is the Quigley factor. And so the Quigley factor is this guy, we hired him, and we would go out with customers, and we go out with customers still now, but not quite as much as we used to, obviously, especially since the pandemic. But at one point we were always taking customers out to dinner, and so it happened a lot, right? And so we'd ask different salespeople to come along. This guy would go into the restaurant, and he would sit down, and he would start off by saying, "Oh yeah, like I'll have like a double scotch, and what do you want, black or I don't know alcohol, I don't drink, but I mean, like he'll order the black Johnny Walker Black if that's the expensive one, whichever one. If there was a gold, he would order Johnny Walker Gold, right? Then he would go to then he'd go to the menu, right? And the customer orders like, chicken Parmesan or the salmon, the blackened salmon. And, the boss orders, maybe a steak or something and whatever. And he goes, "I'll have the surf and turf," And so we came up with this joke after a while where we realized that it wasn't, we would basically open the menu, me and one of my coworkers, and we'd look and quickly scan what's the most expensive thing on the menu. And we go, yeah, he's going to have the sea bass, the Chilean sea bass. And because it was the most expensive thing. Right. And then they would get around to him and he's like, "Yeah, I think tonight I'll have the Chilean sea bass, please." Right. And it was just a bad look. Right. And
so, for sure.
Yeah. Especially when the boss is paying, right? Or someone else for that matter, right? But yeah, so those are some of the some of the stories, and and again, I'm pretty honest about some of the mistakes I've made in my career, and and I recommend to the reader not to make them. So,
yeah. That's, I think, the best lessons we learn. And so, as we get older, one of the gifts that we give people is we share our mistakes so they don't have to make them, or if they make them, at least they might know a solution how to get out of the mess that they just created.
Yeah.
So it's time for us to do the rapid fire, and I saw on your website that you like to hike. So what's the best hiking trip you ever took?
That would be in Santorini in Greece, I guess, where you go between Firo and Oyo, or I can't remember the names actually of the two cities, but it's I think 11 kilometers, kind of along the side of the mountain there. And yeah, wow, that was quite the hike, I would say, and I got some good photos from that trip. I was
just gonna say, you probably got awesome photos.
Yeah, that was probably the best, but yeah, my place up north, we're in what's called Blue Mountain, and I mean, a lot of people would say that's not a mountain, but it's the best I can do in Ontario, and it's part of the Niagara Escarpment from the it's a natural formation, and the hiking is incredible, and the Bruce Trail obviously runs all through here, and so there's really good hiking actually in Ontario. So, but definitely awesome. Greece was probably top of the list.
So you wrote a book, you talked about the business you have. What's next on your journey?
Well, so I love being transparent and honest about things. So doing podcasts and things like that is definitely the highlight of my day, especially versus working for a boss that I never had before, at least not in the last 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so, trying to figure out, and I have to stay here for a couple years, based on them acquiring the company and everything. But as that sort of times out, I'd love to, maybe do a more, a speaking tour of some sort or another, however I can establish that for myself. Right. I'm still working on how exactly to do that. But right now I'm sort of dipping my toe in the podcast realm. And like I said, it's definitely the highlight of my day. And I love doing that. So I'd love to share some of the stories. And I am realizing I joined a mentoring group with other, entrepreneurs and stuff. And I realized that I've been through a lot of things at my business that I could share with other entrepreneurs who are maybe earlier on in their game, how to set up compensation, how to deal with problem employees, how to structure sales and marketing teams. I have a lot to share in that regard. And so, on a limited basis, I'd love to.
Sounds like a coaching program to me.
Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll have to check back with you in a year, see where you are. So I'm going to share my screen now so those that are listening as well as watching can get Glenn's information. You can screenshot the, if you're watching, or I will give the website. All the information is on my YouTube and also will be on my website. So the website is Glenn Poulos. So that's GLENNPOULOS.com, glennpoulos.com. You can find him on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter using his name. And I'm going to let him talk to you about what you can find on his website, glennpoulos.com.
Right. So thank you for that. And so if you go to my website, there's some little giveaways. There's a scenario I have called the Punch Perfect Pitch and Close, which is a multi-page little worksheet for sales and other people, anyone, to create a compelling presentation, right, on how to win business using my technique, which I call the Punch Perfect Pitch and Close, right? And
nice.
But I also have snippets from the book there and links to all the social media sites, all the podcast links that I've participated on are there. And if anyone wanted to talk to me or have a question or something like that, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I'm definitely post every day and, working hard to engage on that platform. I do participate in the other ones, but LinkedIn is definitely the one where I put the most energy, and I'm definitely easy to find on LinkedIn. So.
Well, that's a smart thing to do for LinkedIn for what you do. So I would concur. So just as a reminder to everyone, attraction is not a choice. I've written it down and we all should remember it. Well, it has been just so wonderful chatting with you, laughing with you, sharing stories. I would encourage everyone to go to your website, also to get your book that is available, I saw, on Amazon. So Never Sit in the Lobby by Glenn Poulos. Again, Never Sit in the Lobby. Thank you so much for being a great guest. And remember, life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.